Record and I'll get started. Alright, I'm gonna challenge myself today. I'm gonna try and talk a lot quieter than I did with White Clouds. With White Clouds, I basically didn't allow myself any control over my volume, and that caused issues. That's all I want to say about that. Thankfully, they were only minor issues, like my roommate wasn't royally pissed at me, but he is trying to get some sleep, so I'm going to try and be a little more quiet. You know, kind of like how I was with both Cold Steel 1 and 2, where I was trying to keep my voice down because, with Cold Steel 1, it was because it was like 6 in the morning, and because with Cold Steel 2, it was because it was like 1 in the morning. Look, I was wide awake and I was overdue for recording the Cold Steel 2 review, okay? Anyways. Azure Moon. Oh, where do I even begin with Azure Moon? Alright, let me just drop the bombshell right now so you can just hate me forever, click off the video, and just go away. Hey, if you need to. I hate Azure Moon. I hate Azure Moon with a passion. There, now that the bombshell's out of the way. Now, for those that saw the stream, you're probably sitting there thinking, but Blue Wolf, you rated it net positive on the score modification thing because you were curious about what the score modification was for each route, right? It was a +6. It made it so that Azure Moon, sure, it came in third place, but, you've admitted you're an Edelgard simp, and Claude is Claude, so... And that's very true. I want to explain why Azure Moon failed for me before I really start getting into it. Azure Moon failed because of something I like to call pendulum theory. Well, to be more accurate, the lore runner calls pendulum theory. Pendulum theory is kind of easy to explain and yet simultaneously hard to explain. The idea is that I need to turn my monitor off. The idea is that pendulum theory is you swing, you hear so much good about a game that your mind, even subconsciously, quietly, will notice more of the nitty-gritty little nitpicks, right? And the nitpicks will bother you more because you've heard so much universal praise. And the same is true in the opposite direction. Somebody claims that this is the worst of all time. Well, your expectations are going to go up, and if it doesn't meet those expectations, you're going to be disappointed, even in a negative sense, right? Disappointing, even in a negative sense. I've actually heard this before, or in regards specifically to Superman 64, where, the legendarily bad game, and then somebody played it and was like, well, I mean, this is bad, but it's not the worst ever, Yeah. And this is an example for me of the reverse. I could imagine somebody could look at me gushing about Sacred Stones, for example, and be like, well, Sacred Stones isn't that good. Fair enough. I mean, I was in legitimate shock when the score for Sacred Stones, and spoilers, beat Three Houses. Because I was not expecting that, because I figured Three Houses is, objective quality would drag it up. And then Sacred Stones also had objective qualities that raised it up. My opinion, right? Right? There are some positives and negatives that I imagine, some people wouldn't give Three Houses. And there are some positives and negatives they wouldn't give Sacred Stones. This is all just my opinion, because there is no such thing as an objective review. Ew, and the fact that, and in my opinion, trying to come close to an objective review is just nonsense. It is a contradiction in terms, in my opinion. You know, trying to form an objective opinion is literally a contradiction in terms, and even trying to make one that's somewhat objective is once again, in my opinion, a contradiction in terms. But that is, as ever, just my opinion. Ha ha ha. So, grain of salt with all of this. Let's get into the nitty gritty of why Azure Moon fails, shall we? So, the first note I actually have is about the time skip itself, which is funny, because I actually have a specific note about the time skip in that, which means there's a time skip note in all three of these parts. But I'm not going to get into the very nature of the time skip, but I will say this much. Outside of how we go into the time skip, I do think Azure Moon is Dimitri specifically, is the most. Well, no, yeah, Azure Moon is. Azure Moon is the most that where is the route that is that the 5 year time skip does the most damage to, in my opinion. Because with Silver Snow, yeah, makes sense. It's that it makes sense that it makes no sense. Hence, although I like the idea that the only reason we beat Edelgard is because she finally has this big epic battle that she loses, and thus she loses at the cost of Claude going missing. Spoilers for Silver Snow, I guess. It's not that I care, but Claude going missing, Dimitri being freaking dead, which is something we're gonna have to talk about when we get to when I discuss Silver Snow. From my perspective, I haven't discussed it. From your perspective, you might have already seen me discuss it or forget to discuss it because, as you've you might have seen that already, because again, the nature of this is that I encourage you to watch part one, then part two, and then just White Clouds, and then White Clouds has like links to the other three routes. So for all I know, you could be watching these in reverse order of what I'm recording them, but I am recording them Azure Moon, Black Silver, Azure Moon, Silver Snow, Crimson Flower, and then Verdant Wind. A Silver Snow and Crimson Flower are going to be one video. It's just I'm going to talk about Silver Snow first because I have almost nothing to say, which is ironic given the fact that Silver Snow is literally like half a page of my notes. I've got about a page of notes for Azure Moon, so there's that. Now, before I start really going into the nitty gritty of why I hated Azure Moon, let's talk about what I liked about Azure Moon, because there were a few things sprinkled all throughout that I enjoyed immensely. First and foremost, the support conversations, right? Which I suppose isn't too much of a surprise. But you're probably thinking, wait, if you hate Azure Moon, why did its score and modification score a net positive? The support conversations are why. See, the support conversations with Dimitri, Dedu, and even Gilbert, though Gilbert is a terrible character, and we'll talk about him in a minute. The support conversations with Dimitri, Dedu, and Gilbert are fantastic, in my opinion. They work really well. They are very engaging, very. They work for what they are. They are exquisite, exquisite freaking support conversations, and I love it immensely because the thing that makes, how do I put this? The thing that makes the support conversations with Dimitri work is that it shows character growth, and that character growth feels natural and smooth and progresses. The problem with Dimitri's character growth is it feels like it's a light switch every goddamn time, right? So we start with the light switch on Dimitri is, a typical Fire Emblem Lord. Then we flip the switch down, and he's in Boar mode. Kill every last one of them, right? Then spoilers, Roderick dies in a terrible triple negative scene, in my opinion. And then we flip the switch back up with the Byleth extending their hand scene, and there you go. Now Dimitri is back to being a typical Fire Emblem Lord, with Edelgard continuing to be written terribly, but let's not get into that right now. So that was good. And I also liked the ending cutscene. The symbolism of the dagger being jammed into Dimitri to symbolize the severing of the bond between Dimitri and Edelgard forever. That was nice symbolism. I still fucking hate that has to be a thing, but you know what? I at least will give you that they do something with it. So credit where it's due. This is the Sindel retcon from Mortal Kombat 11 all over again. Go watch Lore's stream of that, or even his post-stream room for that, for more info on that. That's all I have for positives. That's it. Pretty much. Actually, let me double check my notes. Let's see. Oh, no, what am I thinking? There's two actual more things. Actually, there's a few more things. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I'm wrong. I guess since we mentioned the ending, you know, so the support conversations were the first thing. I love the cutscene where we reunite with Dimitri. Even the part where he's accusing us of being an Imperial spy, which is just it shows why him coming out of Boar mode shouldn't have been a light switch. But I digress. But I love that scene. Chris Hackney does an amazing job as Dimitri. Byleth reaches out their hand, which not which is funny because that means Byleth does that twice. But Byleth reaches out her hand, or no, his hand. Sorry, because I was male Byleth during my Azure Moon run. So in my Azure Moon run, and Byleth reached out his hand, and I love Dimitri's line when he sees that because he doesn't believe it. Right? He reaches out his hand, and he says, "Is I should have known that one day you would be haunting me too." God, that says everything it needs to about how broken Dimitri is at this point. Crimson Flower doesn't get it across at all. And I would argue neither does Verdant Wind and neither does Silver Snow, especially not well, I guess especially not Verdant Wind because Silver Snow tries, but Silver Snow has its own issues with that, which again we'll discuss in the Silver Snow Crimson Flower video. You know. But yeah, no, it's a beautiful scene, and I love the realization of wait, you're still alive, and then it's like, oh, so you're an Imperial spy, and he's thinking the worst because he's been through hell. This is an example. Dimitri is an example of what the Lore Runner has talked about so many goddamn times. When you go through hell, you will either come out of it with the best of yourself or the worst of yourself. Claude comes out of hell, which is basically the entirety of the time skip of this war and time skip and all that shit. He comes out of it with the best of himself. Dimitri and Edelgard both come out of it with the worst of themselves. Because Edelgard went through the hell of Twisted's experiments, which we'll talk about more in the Black Eagles video. And she came out of it with the worst of herself. The only difference is that even when you side with her, no one really pulls her out of that. Again, because this game has that fucking narrative hate boner for Edelgard, which I'm gonna try not to bitch about too much. But that really is what stems from all of the writing problems of this game, is that the game tries to treat Edelgard like she's the main villain, when the main villain is standing right over there cackling like a fucking madman. You can constantly hear him cackling like a fucking madman, but no, it's the woman that's standing right in front of us. In front of us, who would turn to our side if we literally said, "Ed, marry me," or go on a date with me, or something, right? If Byleth literally dropped trow and said, "I want to be with you," she'd join Byleth in a fucking heartbeat. Okay, maybe not literally, but she would at least pause and consider it. She'd actually fucking take pause, I'm sure. The problem is that Edelgard treats this as an all or nothing. You know, she literally says, "I would have done anything to make you my ally." Except the narrative doesn't let us have her prove that by having her give up the war. Because that's exactly what should have happened. She should have given up the war, joined us, and made a coalition of the actual lords, politically pushed Rhea into stopping her fucking bullshit, because she does need to stop her fucking bullshit, and, and then the three lords unite, you know? Which is annoying for me, because one of the things that actually got spoiled for me possibly because of a YouTube video, is the fact that there's apparently a secret route in Three Hopes. I don't know if that's actually true, or if that was just a hoax, or whatever, but I guess we'll see, because, later today I'm going to be reviewing it, right? I'm going to be playing it. In fact, I am literally going to be playing it in about 2 hours and 20 minutes from my perspective. Now we'll see how far I get through recording some videos during that time, but there you go. And that's my biggest, but again, but to get this back to Azure Moon, Dimitri went through hell and came out of it with the worst of himself, just like Edelgard did. But unlike Edelgard, where her coming out with the worst of herself was, let's just call it what it is, bad writing, because she should be blaming the people who actually conducted the fucking experiments on her, which was not the church, by the way. Dimitri is actually well written, coming out of it with the worst of himself, because he broke. Now remember, what's funny is that I've talked about going through hell. Claude, admittedly, one could argue, didn't actually go through hell. Not really. I mean, he kind of did. He was forced to live a childhood where he was constantly mocked, scorned, and all of that shit. Because he is, spoilers, half Elmiran, half Fodlan. You know, because of his mix of Fodlan and Elmiran heritages, he was mocked, he was derided, he was treated as a freak, which is a different kind of hell. As there are three kinds of hells that each of the main lords go through in their youth. Edelgard, like I said, goes through the horrible experimentations, just like Lysithea does. Claude goes through the prejudice and the, well, let's call it what it is, the racism. And Dimitri suffers from PTSD and mental trauma because of the tragedy at Dusker. By the way, in a golden room, the tragedy of Dusker would absolutely be fully investigated and dealt with. Absolutely. Because the tragedy of Dusker is something that should have been called out. You know, every single party involved should have been called out for their bullshit in that regard, right? You know, the Warriors of Dusker's reaction to it, Twisted's instigation of it, and the Church of Saros' fucking negligence when it came to it. And yes, I spit venom on the I spit the most venom on that last part because the Warriors of Dusker. Okay, that's understandable. The Twisted. Well, that's obvious, right? Of course, we're supposed to be mad at the villains who caused the tragedy. But the Church of Saros is the one that I'm sure some people would look at me and go, "Huh? You're not gonna fucking tell me they properly investigated it." Especially considering entering that, especially with Azure Moon being like, wait, having Gilbert and Rodrigue just think about it for a few moments, and they start to piece together the problems with everything involving the Church of Saros. Are you fucking telling me that the Knights of Saros were that fucking incompetent that they couldn't even piece anything together? That their findings were that inconclusive? It doesn't work. And in my setting, you bet your ass I'd be calling everyone out. In my setting, you bet your ass my self-insert character calls everyone out on it. Now, I'm going to try and keep OC mode out of this as much as I can. And because that's... I did that so much on the goddamn stream because I couldn't help it. Because the bad writing was getting to me. But, yeah. Which is funny because Azure Moon was the one time where OC mode was not heavily prevalent, but I digress. So then Gilbert explains we we reunite with the Blue Lions and Gilbert, and then Gilbert explains about how uh, Dimitri's uncle, who was basically a proxy king, and basically acting as king, Fergus, to kind of just keep things in check for the most part, was murdered by Cornelia and blamed it on Dimitri. Cornelia is so blatantly and obviously evil that the fact that nobody fucking calls her out on this shit is frankly disgusting, in my opinion. I mean, for God's sakes, the dukedom, for God's sakes, is so blatant that it's just like, okay. Okay, go ahead and be obviously evil with nobody stepping in because you're that goddamn stupid. And that's the problem with Fodlan. Fodlan in a nutshell. The second Rhea disappears, here's the people of Fodlan start guzzling paint thinner on a fucking regular basis. With very few exceptions. Are you fucking serious? How does nobody how is there not a massive fucking revolt? Don't bring up the sheeple argument, okay? Hey, I mean, I get it. In many fictional settings, the MCs are supposed to be the only ones with brains, but come on. You're stretching the believability of this crap, okay? I may not like realism in my fiction. In fact, I think a lot of more realism could stand to be taken out of fiction, but the believability also still has to be there, right? especially considering you can use fiction to make allegories and shit, you know? But I digress. So, let's talk about Gilbert since I brought him up now. I hate him as a character. I really do. I didn't give him any story negatives, and almost feel like I should have. Actually, I don't know if I did or not. But I'll keep talking as I go through this. I, the thing is that I feel like the biggest issue that I run into when it comes to this, and when it comes to this is uh, Gilbert really feels like he should have been a better written character, but instead he's just some jackass who blames himself for the tragedy of Dusker and thus as constantly is like, yeah, no, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna be an idiot because why wouldn't I be? Which is just okay. Apparently, I did not jot down a note for. Oh my god, I did not actually give him a negative. Huh. Uh, okay then. I guess okay. The most I gave him was actually it was for the his S support with Byleth and his epilogue, which was just terrible. See, the biggest problem with Gilbert is spoilers. He's Annette's dad, and he doesn't act like Annette's dad. He acts like some like, oh no, I'm tainted. I can't be around you anymore. Okay, Gilbert, you're a fucking idiot. Because one, the Knights of Fargus and the Knights of Saros both are honored to have you as an ally. That's problem one with your bullshit. Problem two is neither Annette nor Annette's mother give a fuck about your disgrace. They love you, not your title. You moron. And that is the biggest problem. I hate this so much because it doesn't fucking work. Gilbert is one of those characters where I feel like he would work better if the whole thing with him was was that he spent those 5 years trying to deal with all of this stuff and was also sending letters to explain that, yeah, okay, I need to do all this other shit. And then when I come home, I'll make amends. It's so fucking stupid. So then we reunite with the Church of Saros, and then Dimitri starts acting like all rar. Like I'm I'm in bore mode, and then Felix, who I remind you pre-time skip was being like so the boar has shown his true colors. Literally says, "What's with him? He seems like a completely different person." What? Felix, he's acting like the fucking boar you called him in part one. What the fuck? that that line just pissed me off and got a story negative on its own because it was like, are you fucking kidding me? No. No. I refuse. Refuse to accept that bullshit, you know? So then we start getting more into the nature of Dimitri's delusions. Like I said, Dimitri is a broken man. He's having these delusions of the dead wanting Edelgard's head. But the problem is, as he will himself admits to later, and I literally paused in the stream even to explain this, he's a goddamn hypocrite for saying that because he doesn't know what the dead want either. It's high time for Dimitri to fucking forgive himself. Then Randolph and Flace show up. Okay. So at this point we deal with Randolph, and then this is where Dimitri proves that he is turned into a fucking villain. And this is where the writing for Azure Moon really shits the bed, in my opinion. See, you want Dimitri to be violent and kind of homicidal. Okay, I'm with that. Broken, wanting, kill every last one of them. I'm with it. Why does he talk about torturing Randolph? Like, why is the only reason Randolph is not tortured the fact that Byleth just fucking mercy kills him? This is my problem. This is not the actions of a broken man. This is the actions of what everybody accuses fucking Edelgard of. Dimitri literally says, word for word, Nerd, I will not kill you right away, my fellow monster. I'm going to kill you slowly and painfully, and only then will I grant you death. Okay, maybe not word for word, but he basically says that in that exact thing. No, seriously, look it up. Azure Moon, Dimitri and Randolph scene. Like, it's fucking despicable. Never mind the fact that when Byleth is like, this isn't you, Dimitri laughs in Byleth's face and says, is if you can't tolerate what I've become, then kill me. If you can't, I'm going to keep using you. I can't, what? Our hero, ladies and gentlemen. The only thing that keeps this from being worse, in my opinion, is he somewhat acknowledges this in saying that my hands are too stained with blood and blah 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 blah. But the problem is the stained with blood thing would be even better if you didn't have a scene where he literally says he's going to torture a man to death. Torture is one of the worst things imaginable. And the second you start bringing it up, you stop becoming a man I have any real fucking sympathy for. Nobody brings this up. Nobody acknowledges this. They just say it's part of his journey to become better. No, it's part of the fucking writing's inability to not understand that this is the actions of a full villain. This is the kind of shit that should make Dimitri at least somewhat irredeemable until the kind of shit that would have him have to start on a full tilt thing. But no, by the end, everybody's cheering his fucking and singing his fucking praises. He says the people are enamored with him, and he's the great king and all that other shit. Are you fucking serious? This is the kind of shit that he should be doing on the other routes. The routes where his death is the end of his character arc. Spoilers. This is the kind of bullcrap I would expect from Crimson Flower Dimitri. But no, Crimson Flower Dimitri arguably acts more heroic than Azure Moon Dimitri. And that's fucking backwards AF. Yep. AF. Fucking Azure Moon Dimitri should be the one looking at his allies using crest stones and him being aghast at that. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Why did you think that was a good idea? What fucked up logic are you running under? But no, instead that's how he is in Crimson Flower, and we're supposed to want him dead for that. He acts more heroic in Crimson Flower than in any of the other routes. If Edelgard uh, confronts him, must you continue to walk this savage, bloody path? Must you continue to kill, continue to conquer? And sure, Edelgard's response is, must you continue to reconquer, continue to kill in retaliation, right? Which is in a way kind of true across all the routes, but at the same time, it's more true in Azure Moon than it is in anything else. This is a man who's so fucking far gone. He's calling for torture as if it's a pleasurable thing. Listen to the way Chris Hackney performs the fucking line. He sounds almost delighted that he's going to be torturing Randolph. Like, what the fuck? Again, our hero, everyone. And I'd be a lot more okay with this. I really would. If this was a God of War situation, specifically in the Greek era of the God of War games, because Kratos was never really touted as a hero. Even in the first game, he was called the Ghost of Sparta. He was looked at with mostly fear, mostly anguish, and he was not a good person. That was the whole point of the God of War games, was that he was not a good person, and the only reason we were rooting for him to kill the fucking Greek gods is because the Greek gods were even fucking worse. Because they continued to manipulate and control him throughout the entire fucking series. And that was the whole point of God of War. But Azure Moon is supposed to be the story of a prince who's fallen to darkness and needs to be pulled out of it. Forgive me for being blunt, but if you ejected him saying that Randolph was going to be tortured, like if you just said that like if the most evil thing Dimitri ever did was, I want to hear you beg for your life, so that I can deny you, at least that would still be kind of villainous, and we'd still be going like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I'd still be going, whoa, what the fuck? But it wouldn't be Dimitri saying that he's going to torture a man. And don't even get me started if this was Slavia or someone. And don't even get me started on the fact that, by all intents and purposes, in many regards, he does feel like he just is there for the status quo. Like, he changes things up. He makes merit more worth a damn, but crests are still a fucking prevalent thing as far as I remember from the freaking epilogues. And it's so stupid. But whatever. So then Gilbert and Annette have their little uh, paralogue, which is actually not bad. And it's actually kind of cool. The whole uh, having to do a show, do the showmanship for the benefit of Gilbert's brother. That's cool. So then we get to the rose-colored river chapter, where, as I mentioned before, frickin' as where Lawrence is siding with the Empire because he's an idiot. We also kill Ferdy if we don't recruit him. I hate the unrecruited student deaths, by the way. Just hate them. By the way, if you didn't recruit Lawrence and you go to you basically have no choice but to kill him. Like, actually kill him here. Go to hell, game. But anyways, then as we're proceeding across the Great Bridge of Murden to conquer it, to move on to Gronder, Dedue shows up out of nowhere. Okay, we gotta talk about this. Dedue shows up and is like, I am here, your highness. Wait, Dedue, you survived? You were supposed to be the reason I survived. How did you? The people of Dusker helped me. And that's the only line that indicates whether or not. And that line is there specifically to explain, to basically hint at the fact that this is because you did War for the Weak. War for the Weak is a paralogue in the pre-time skip that I said I was going to talk about. Here, we're here in Azure Moon, so let's discuss it. So the objective of War for the Weak is Dedue's paralogue, and he requests that we go and help. We help the people of Dusker survive. In other words, we are effectively helping the church defeat as many Dusker enemies as we can. But what we're doing is we're doing it in such a way that if we defeat them, they don't die. We just knock them out. We basically just weaken them and tell them, get the hell out of here. Here. Any ones that the church is, that the church soldiers defeat, or no, sorry, I'm saying this wrong. The kingdom soldiers, excuse me. Any of the ones the kingdom soldiers defeat, just die because the church soldiers are out to kill them. Okay. Now, the only thing, the only other thing with that is, how do I put this? The thing with that is that so we do that, and then Dedue is like, Dimitri will create a world where where Dusker people will be uh, alleviated of the crime, or however he phrases it, right? They believe in Dedue strongly enough that Dedue ends up becoming alive. But the thing is that it's this tonal whiplash because he celebrates Dedue who coming back, and then immediately goes into calling the Empire fools. Honestly, I would have made it so that Dedue came back not during the map, but at the end of the map, like after all of the cutscenes and everything. I'd have a scene. I'd have a scene in we. Excuse me. Not unlike the transition between the Dedue scene and the calling the Empire soldiers fools. I'd actually have a scene that would transition to Dedue showing up and saying, Your Highness. And then there you go. That scene can play out basically as is. Dedue's survival is the only consequence of choice in the entirety of Azure Moon, in my opinion. Everything else is forced upon you, other than the unrecruited student deaths, and that the unrecruited student deaths are bullshit. They are story negatives. Almost universally were story negatives. The only exceptions were Hanneman and Manuela, and that's just because they were actually decently written bits of dialogue. The rest were just awful. Awful. Why does Bernie die? Because we're fucking assholes and we go kill Bernie. Ernie. Why does Petra die? Because she sides with Edelgard. Why does Dorothea die? Because she's sick of war, and if the war is having to pit each other, be pitted against each other, then she will not respect the goddess. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Although I will argue that that is not actually Sothis' will, but I digress. Yes, you know. So then we get the Grandra cutscene that you've seen from the trailers, Oh, Edelgard being like, we fought here once as classmates, but not today. You know, Claude being like, as far as class reunions go, this has got to be the worst in history. And Dimitri, of course, being like, you should know that I will kill you all. The dead must have their tribute, that whole thing. So then we do War at Gronder, which is a terrible map, in my opinion. And then Roderick dies. Alright, I need to explain why this death is actually worse than Gerald's death. Gerald's death, as I discussed with White Clouds, was bad. But this is Terra bad. Rodrigue's death, the biggest problem with Rodrigue's death is the way it happens is Flay shows up and monologues for like a solid minute. More than enough time for somebody to go up to her, grab her by the wrist, slam her to the ground. Obviously, we're not trying to kill her because we're not Dimitri, but like basically grab the knife, get it out of her, rip it out of her hand, and restrain her, and then lock her up for trying to kill Dimitri or whatever, right? Or even Dimitri could spin around and stab her with Ardbar, all right? But he hesitates for some dumb reason. Wait, you are, and and mentioned this on the stream. If you really wanted to have the whole realization thing, and have it be that instead of have it be that okay, if we don't have to do survive, then okay, Roderick dies because of stupidity. But have it be that if Dedu is there, have Dedu step up and deflect Deflacious knife. Nope, denied. Hide, and then have Dedu strike her down. Because then you don't generate a giant plot hole with Divine Pulse. Because apparently Divine Pulse is something that Byleth will only use for somebody that they actually care about. So fuck Rodrigue, I guess. I hate that scene so goddamn much. The dialogue is insipid. I'm not dying for you, I'm dying for what I believe in. That's a fucking excuse and you know it, Rodrigue. The fucking it, the whole cutscene incompetence nonsense and the fucking plot hole of Divine Pulse not being even attempted. Oh, and don't give me that Byleth is too exhausted thing, because Byleth is the one that cuts Fleisch down. Argument debunked. I'm sorry, it is. Anyways, then we get the scene where Dimitri is wallowing in despair and is going to go try and deal with Edelgard himself. But then Byleth reaches out their hand and basically says, look, you gotta forgive yourself, man. This needs to stop. This needs to stop. You need to stop torturing yourself for this. Let it all go. Live for yourself, damn it. That was a damn good scene. 2 positives to story for that scene. And that's why I hate Azure Moon. It's bipolar as fuck. One minute it's got this scene that is so goddamn hair-pullingly stupid that I want to fucking punch a hole in the wall, and then we get a scene immediately after that's like that. What? It's such a good scene. And it is such a good scene, you know? It is such a great scene. The rain effects, Chris Hackney's voice acting is on point the entire freaking thing because he basically has to carry the entirety of that scene completely. It's brilliant. It's well done. Tell me, Professor. Tell me what I should do. That line was brilliantly done. I even like the scene right after where he immediately starts his atonement, and where he starts atoning and starts what Gast calls the freaking redemption arc. It's great. I even like when he returns home, which is just great. So then we go take back the kingdom, and we deal with Cornelia, who confesses in her final moment that Edelgard's mother was her and Edelgard's mother were responsible for the tragedy at Dusker. So there you go. Oh. So they discuss the tragedy of Dusker. Gilbert's suspicions are confirmed. I already mentioned the Gilbert and Rodrigue talking about it. So then Dimitri turns to it, becomes it basically becomes king for the most part. He doesn't want to be referred to as king, and not until he feels ready enough for it. Which by defeating the Empire, apparently, that's his atonement. Whatever. I've already bitched enough about the whole fact that this is a literal fucking switch flip. So whatever. So then Claude calls for our aid before we even take back the kingdom capital. How did he know Dimitri was gonna snap out of his bore mode by this point? Now Claude's whole point is that he believes in Teach and Byleth, but that's a gamble, dude. Like that is a gamble on law and odds, and you know it. Yeah, so we go to deal with Daedru, which is under attack by Arundel, and we kill Arundel, and we get no information out of him about the tragedy of Dusker. Disappointing as fuck. Moving on. So then Claude disbands the Alliance and folds it into the kingdom. Whatever. I'm iffy on that, honestly, but it's whatever. He needs to go back to. He needs to disappear from the plot, so. Yes, because we just need to write out all the good characters, I guess. Oh, God damn it, game. Anyways. So then we go and we deal with the Death Knight, but then we have to stop and go back because apparently now we got to interrogate somebody that decided to confess to being a part of the tragedy of Dusker. Why couldn't this lead up to a confrontation with Arundel instead of we deal with Arundel, then we deal with the Death Knight, and then we come back? The pacing is a little wonky on that. It's kind of bad, if I'm honest. I don't know if I gave it a pacing negative, but I feel like I probably should have if I didn't. Ugh. So there were three things that Azure Moon exclusively got three negatives for. Three triple negatives for. There were three triple negatives in Azure Moon. I've already discussed one, that was Rodrigue's death. Let's talk about the parlay with Edelgard, the meeting with Edelgard scene. Fuck that scene. No attempt to actually talk Edelgard down is made. It's literally just a philosophy talk back and forth for like. It's basically, this is what we think. This is how we feel. It is literally the audience telling you how these characters are feeling. This is stupid, and I hate it. There's no attempt to actually talk Edelgard down. I even discussed the idea of having a frickin' dialogue battle. If we fail the dialogue battle, then we go deal with Hegemon Edelgard. But if we succeed, let that be the end of the fucking war. And then have the final boss be Nemesis showing up out of nowhere or something. But no, Rhea's got to continue to be irrelevant to this fucking storyline because Rhea doesn't even appear. Fun fact, after the time skip in Azure Moon, Rhea doesn't make even one appearance. She's mentioned a bunch of times because Mercedes is apparently super worried about Lady Rhea for some reason. Mercedes, why are you a Rhea simp? What the fuck? I know she's supposed to be, the devout follower and all that, but no. No, that makes no sense. Go to hell. Go to hell. I hate that scene because it's just, we gotta treat Edelgard like a villain. It's just, let's just cement Edelgard as further the villain. Go to hell. Then, and we assault Embar, and then Edelgard decides to transform into Hegemon Edelgard. I hate Hegemon Edelgard, by the way. The whole idea of Edelgard turning herself into that grotesque form to fight Dimitri is frankly stupid. Never mind the double standard of I have no sympathy for one such as you, and then in the ending cutscene he's reaching out his hand. Let's not even get into that bullshit. So then Edelgard dies. I've already commented on that scene. It was one of the few good things that were there. And then Azure Moon just ends. Rhea is vindicated and she's let off the hook through the fact that she wasn't even relevant to the story at all. And that's the end of Azure Moon. I hate Azure Moon. The fact of the matter is there's so many aspects of Azure Moon that are just fucking awful, in my opinion. And the fact of the matter is that they are so heavily ignored, even though they are major, 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 major fucking plot holes, disgusts me. I've been yapping for about an hour now, so I'm just gonna chop off. I know I've been doing more ranting than anything, but that's because I hate Azure Moon, like I said. It makes me wonder how long I'm gonna be at frickin' Silver Snow and Crimson Flower. Regardless, though, I'm going to chop off. I hope you've at least tolerated my thoughts because I've been doing that because I've been ripping Azure Moon a new asshole this entire time. And I will see you guys is either in Sacred Stones if this is the last of the 3 routes you're watching. What a way to end, huh? Or if in part, or if you're watching these in order, I'll see you in part 4, which will be Silver Snow and Crimson Flower.